Thank you all for being here this afternoon. The idea of today's community practice is, through my experience in the player pathway with the performance centres, academy centres, development centres, I've identified a few emerging themes, and I thought that'd be really good if we could open those up to discussion to all our different areas within the pathway. So hopefully we'll target NAGS, what's going on in NAGS, Futures Cup Performance Centre and the Academy and Development Centre. I will be explaining a few examples through my own experiences, however, really interested in what everyone else's experiences are in their various environments. So specifically I will be targeting the Academy Development and the Performance Centres because that's where my experience lies. Hopefully in a couple more years I'll be able to make my way up to Futures Cup, but at the moment at the top with Performance Centre. So physical literacy, athlete burnout, and targeting developing declarative knowledge of our coaches will be our three themes today. Okay. So within the player pathway, always looking at end in mind, whether that's short term or long term. So short term might be end in mind within the performance centres, preparing our players, developing our players for some of them for the best v best tournament at Futures Cup, for example. Or you have your long term, looking from bottom to top, maybe over an 8-year span, or long term as in from Futures Cup, working your way up to our Olympic players. Okay. So all the time we're looking, when we discuss our themes, what can we do in the short term or what can we discuss in the long term? So first of all, physical literacy. Now I know this can be quite a hot topic. I've noticed it within the performance centres where it might not be the expected standard we feel it should be. However, the challenge there is no rule book, there is no manual of what this standard should be. So in little groups now, I don't know if you want to split yourselves in halves or split yourselves within NAGS, Performance Centre or Academy Centre sort of thing. What is a definition of physical literacy? Now I know some of you will probably know that off the top of your head. So first of all, in a definition of physical literacy, then I almost want you to write a statement of what physical literacy means in your environment. So is it going to be the same at NAGS that it is in the community? Or are we going to have some overlap?
Those movement skills.
So touching on the fundamental movement skills, so a model which I learned about how many years ago now, in first year, was the Sol interventional model. So stability, object control and locomotion. So it looks at working towards and developing these fundamental skills, as well as developing a person who can build on social and physical skills. So it's not like we're talking about, it's not just the physical side of things, there is social elements to it, and obviously there's the cognitive with knowledge, etc. Develop the ability to think, be creative, and lead a healthy lifestyle. So moving it away from a specific sport, if, for example, they stepped away, a performer stepped away from the player pathway, do they have the fundamental movement skills to carry on away from their sport, maybe as a rehabilitation process if they're injured, and come back in? So what I've observed in the performance centres is what you were talking about over here. There's an awful lot of players who can't squat, they can't skip. Bear in mind, a squat is a fundamental movement to hockey. You know, same again with lunge, it's not quite there. But moving on to more of what can we do about this. So in the short term, and Nick helped me out with this at the beginning of the season, we create a really mobile and engaging warm-up. So it's not just your dynamic stretches. We really try to add the mobility side in things. We test them physically and mentally before we've even gone stick or ball. You know, for example, rollerball, bit of bib tag, things like that. Again, preparing the mind, not just the body, for physical activity. Okay, so what I'd like you to have a go at now is, in the short term, are there any strategies, for example, at NAGS or in a performance centre, let's say one session, is there anything we can actually put into play to aid the development of physical literacy? Whether you want to make that sports specific, because there's a Canadian model, I've not quite got it on here, where basically it states you need fundamental movement skills and fundamental movement skills specific to your sport to have physical literacy. You need both. It's like a equation, and that way you can go on to lifelong physical literacy, have the knowledge, or you can go down the sporting excellence route. You can progress. So in theory, it should be physical literacy. You might achieve it at one level. You might just one day almost have it, even though it's quite hard to measure whether you do have it or don't. It might be easy or hard in a sport, but then again, we don't have this manual. So what can we do in the short term and the long term to aid this physical literacy? So the trouble we have in the performance centres, we've got 70 hours a year with our players, usually 2 hours on a Monday night. I could honestly spend 2 hours doing some physical literacy with them, but they're there to play hockey, so they've got to play hockey. So what can we do in that short period of time to aid our players? Then again, these are developing athletes who could go on to Futures Cup and in the same year could play for their national age group. But if you still can't squat, does that mean they're actually limited in how well they can play if they can't do a fundamental skill of a squat? We're going to have to move on. Hopefully, if we've got time at the end, we will come back. Sort of same idea as before, with regards to definitions and statements with your environment. Athlete burnout. How would you define it? And what might that look like within your environment? Or how would you create a statement almost to prevent that within your environment? Because again, we could talk about this forever. Smith, 1986, defined burnout as the emotional, psychological and physical disengagement as a consequence of chronic stress. So the actual, physical reasons are leading to the psychological reasons. Again, I've experienced a little bit of this in coaching this season. It got to a bit where I was doing so much, and I didn't feel like I could leave almost or take a break, and I found that really, really hard. And actually, when I did have a discussion with Nick and a few other coaches, managed to step away, but I actually felt worse after I stepped away because I'd felt I'd failed. That was a massive failure to me. I failed the team, the club, and I failed myself, sort of thing, especially when I'm trying to gain a degree in sports coaching performance. So it's massive. We have to think about not what's happening at the moment, it's what's happening afterwards, what the consequences afterwards. And Rob was talking about then, the role as a coach is growing and growing and growing. At what point is it too much for us as coaches? But as well as this, we were talking about maybe at Future Cup Performance Centres level, they're in full-time education, studying for their GCSEs or A-levels. They're playing clubs, Saturday morning school hockey, Saturday afternoons club hockey. Sunday, you're looking at county, Sunday afternoon club cup competitions, Monday nights, performance centre, etc. so on. So it can become an awful lot. So moving it on now to strategies, lots of strategies have been thrown about, and we were mentioning over here about could you have almost a psychologist or a practitioner in there. So the FA implement now into their a psychologist into their academies. However, they have the luxury of quite a lot more funding than we do as a whole nationally governing body. So is there something similar that could be brought into, for example, like you were saying, performance centres, or does it need to happen lower down? Is it just something that's happening at the top? Do we need to... The issue with this, again, is we can monitor athlete burnout, but can we actually prevent it? Because we've monitored it, we've identified it, great. It's too late, almost. They've burnt out already or on the way to burnout. Is there anything we can do beforehand or implement to prevent it? Maybe not completely, but to severely reduce it. Could that be part of that? Again, we were discussing about you need to have 6 hours first aid, you need to have your safeguarding. Is there another requirement in the area of psychology, or should it be embedded into the safeguarding, some sort of training to be able to, because we were talking about before education, some coaches just aren't confident in kind of delivering what we want at the performance centres. So are some coaches not going to be confident in being able to identify these signs and what to do with them? This links in really nicely with the final theme. We've got so much time at the end. And again, with the physical literacy and the athlete burnout, I feel it links in really, really well. Developing coaches' declarative knowledge. So the why of coaching. Now, I believe this is really only truly hammered at the ACP. So as it's stereotypically, coaches who want to gain their level 3 and 4 want to move up the pathway, stereotypically. But there are lots and lots and lots of coaches out there as well who want to excel at the foundational participation level and become expert coaches in that area who don't feel they want to or need to go into the ACP. So how can we implement, how can we build on coaches, young developing coaches who are just starting off, how can we hammer the why and help them understand, you know, developing their philosophies, why they're coaching, what they're coaching, etc. at an earlier stage. And again, I feel it can possibly be developed if the right, I don't know, foundations or supports in place. So at our academy centre, and we're going to try really hard not to drop any names in here, there are coaches that have coached for as long as I've been alive, basically, and they have the whole way through, me as a player to now as a coach, the same coaches are there. They have not changed their ways whatsoever. And I'm at the age where I'm a lot younger than the other coaches, and I don't feel I can say something. It's really hard. So the only way I've gone about it really is sometimes I will lead and sometimes I'll assist. So when I lead, I will always send my plans or my ideas or whatever to the coach that will be working with me, and I'll always ask them, do you have any questions, brother? So I'm basically almost indirectly forcing them to look how I coach in ways, because again, I've loads of different theories applied from degrees or what I've learned from courses, etc. And again, this people skills kind of thing. Other from that, you know, they don't go in these workshops. I'm not saying they feel like they know everything, but they're pretty set in their ways, and I think that's a major issue.
Massive.
And it's quite frustrating, to be honest. It's bloody frustrating.
Done your level 1 or something.
I think we were talking about almost like a parent pathway. So obviously you've got a player pathway, you can have a parent pathway, or maybe like some sort of pathway within schools or boarding schools, etc., that run in line with everyone knows what everyone's doing, so everyone's on the same page. And how can someone actually, an outsider, say for example a parent who sees things from a different example, how can they aid and help this healthy development of an athlete? Again, however, that's going to be one of these long-term things. It's not going to come in straight away. It's going to be developed. It'll start off with loads of bugs in it, sort of thing. So is that possibly one strategy, do you think, of what could, you know, I don't know, it might be 4 years, might be another two Olympic cycles, something along